In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The streets were lined with cozy homes, mom-and-pop stores, and friendly faces, or so it seemed on the surface. Beneath this picture-perfect facade, however, simmered tensions that no one dared to address openly. Racism was alive and well in this community, hidden behind polite smiles and casual remarks. For Maya Thompson, a young woman of mixed heritage, living in this town meant walking a tightrope every day. Her skin tone made her stand out, but she refused to let prejudice define her. Instead, she focused on building a better future for herself and those around her. Maya was the kind of person everyone admired, hardworking, compassionate, and full of dreams. She worked as a social worker, dedicating her time to helping struggling families and children in need. On weekends, she volunteered at the local food bank and mentored teenagers who lacked guidance. Despite the challenges she faced because of her race, Maya never let bitterness take root in her heart. She believed in the goodness of people and hoped that one day the world would see beyond color and embrace humanity. Her optimism was infectious, earning her respect even from those who didn't always agree with her. Her father, Marcus Thompson, was another pillar of strength in her life. A towering figure with graying temples and a commanding presence, Marcus had served as the town's police chief for over 20 years. He was known for his fairness, integrity, and unwavering commitment to justice. Under his leadership, crime rates dropped, and the department earned a reputation for efficiency. Yet, not everyone appreciated Marcus's success. Some officers resented him, not just because he held authority, but also because of his race. In a predominantly white town, having a black man in such a powerful position stirred resentment among certain groups. These undercurrents of racism often spilled into subtle acts of sabotage, though Marcus ignored them, focusing instead on doing his job with honor. Despite these challenges, Maya and Marcus shared a close bond. They supported each other through thick and thin, finding solace in their shared values and determination to rise above adversity. Their home was a sanctuary filled with laughter, music, and deep conversations about making the world a better place. To outsiders, they appeared to have it all, a loving family, successful careers, and a bright future ahead. But little did they know, their lives were about to be turned upside down in ways they could never have imagined. One chilly autumn evening, everything changed. Maya had stayed late at work, finishing up paperwork for a case involving a troubled teen she'd been mentoring. As she stepped out of the office building, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. She decided to take a shortcut through an alleyway, a route she'd used countless times before without incident. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, creating an eerie yet familiar atmosphere. Maya quickened her pace, eager to get home and relax after a long day. Suddenly, the sound of screeching tires shattered the silence. Startled, Maya turned to see two patrol cars speeding toward her, their flashing lights illuminating the narrow alley. Before she could react, 4 officers jumped out, guns drawn, shouting commands that echoed off the brick walls. "Hands where? We can see them," one of them barked. Confused and frightened, Maya raised her hands instinctively, her heart pounding like a drum. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. No one answered. Instead, she felt rough hands grab her arms, forcing her to the ground. The cold concrete bit into her knees as handcuffs clicked tightly around her wrists. "What are you doing?" "I didn't do anything wrong," Maya pleaded, panic rising in her chest. One of the officers, Detective Harris, loomed over her, his face twisted into a sneer. "We got a tip about someone matching your description fleeing from a burglary," he said coldly. "You're coming with us." Maya's mind raced. Burglary? That was absurd. She hadn't been near any crime scene that night. How could they accuse her of something so outrageous? She tried to explain, but her words fell on deaf ears. The officers searched her bag, rifling through its contents with disdain. Nothing incriminating turned up, but that didn't stop Harris. With a smug grin, he pulled a gold necklace from his pocket and slipped it into her belongings. "Looks like we caught ourselves a thief," he declared, ignoring her protests. As Maya sat in the back seat of the patrol car, tears streaming down her face, she couldn't believe what was happening. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate attempt to frame her. And the worst part? She knew exactly why they were targeting her. It wasn't about evidence or justice. It was about power and prejudice. These officers saw her, skin color, and assumed she was guilty, using their badges as tools of oppression. For the first time in her life, Maya felt truly helpless. She thought about calling her father, but fear gripped her. Would they listen if she mentioned his name? Or would it make things worse? When the patrol car finally arrived at the station, Maya was led inside, her mind swirling with questions and dread. What would happen next? Would anyone believe her side of the story? As she waited in a cold, sterile holding cell, memories of her father's teachings flooded her mind. Marcus had always told her to stand tall in the face of injustice, to fight for what was right no matter how hard it seemed. But now, locked away like a criminal, Maya wondered if fighting was enough. Little did she know, help was already on the way, and when it arrived, it would shake the entire town to its core. The events of that night marked the beginning of a harrowing journey for Maya and Marcus. What started as a routine evening turned into a battle against corruption, racism, and systemic abuse. Together, father and daughter would confront forces far greater than themselves, determined to expose the truth and seek justice. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Every step forward would come with sacrifices, risks, and moments of doubt. Yet, through it all, their love and resilience would shine as a beacon of hope, not just for themselves, but for anyone who dared to challenge the status quo. Hours passed in the cold, sterile confines of the police station. Maya sat on a hard metal chair in an interrogation room, her wrists still sore from the handcuffs. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the walls and amplifying her growing anxiety. Her mind raced with questions. Why were they doing this? What did they hope to gain by framing her? And most importantly, how could she prove her innocence when the system seemed stacked against her? Detective Harris entered the room, his demeanor smug and condescending. He carried a file folder under one arm and pulled out a chair across from Maya, leaning back casually as if he had all the time in the world. "Let's cut to the chase," he said, opening the folder and sliding a photograph toward her. It was the gold necklace they'd planted in her bag earlier. "This belongs to Mrs. Eleanor Grayson. Recognize it?" Maya stared at the photo, her stomach churning. She wanted to scream, to tell him that the necklace wasn't hers, that he'd deliberately set her up. But she knew it wouldn't matter. These officers weren't interested in the truth. They only cared about maintaining control. So instead, she took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "I've never seen that necklace before," she said firmly. "You're lying." Harris chuckled, shaking his head as if amused by her audacity. "Come on, Maya," he replied, using her name for the first time. "We both know how this works. You can either cooperate now or drag this out and make things worse for yourself. Either way, we've got you." His tone dripped with arrogance as though he relished the power he held over her. Desperation clawed at Maya's chest. She needed someone to believe her, someone who could intervene before this nightmare spiraled further out of control. Summoning every ounce of courage, she looked Harris straight in the eye and said, "You don't scare me. My father is Police Chief Marcus Thompson. He'll find out what you've done." For a split second, Harris's smirk faltered. Then, just as quickly, it returned, wider and more menacing than before. "Oh, really?" he drawled, feigning surprise. "The chief's daughter, huh? Well, isn't that convenient?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Maybe you should call Daddy and see if he can bail you out, though I doubt even he can save you from this." His words stung, but Maya refused to let him see her fear. Instead, she demanded to use the phone. After some reluctance, and likely because they underestimated the impact of her threat, they finally allowed her to make a single call. With trembling fingers, she dialed her father's number. Each ring felt like an eternity, until finally, Marcus answered. "Dad," Maya whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of everything she'd endured. "They arrested me. They're saying I stole something, but I didn't do it. Please, you have to help me." On the other end of the line, Marcus froze. For a moment, there was only silence as the gravity of his daughter's words sank in. Then, his voice came through, steady and reassuring. "Stay calm, sweetheart. I'm coming. Don't say anything else until I get there." By the time Marcus arrived at the station, his usual calm demeanor had given way to barely contained fury. His tall frame filled the doorway as he strode into the building, commanding attention without uttering a word. Officers who moments ago had been joking around suddenly fell silent, their expressions shifting from nonchalance to unease. Even Harris, who had seemed so confident during his interrogation of Maya, paled visibly when he realized whose daughter he'd targeted. Marcus wasted no time. He barked orders to review body camera footage, insisting on transparency and accountability. When asked why he was making such a fuss, he fixed the questioning officer with a steely glare. "Because my daughter is innocent," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "And I intend to prove it." As the investigation unfolded, evidence began to surface that contradicted Harris's claims. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed Maya walking alone in the alley, completely uninvolved in any criminal activity. Moreover, witnesses came forward, corroborating her alibi. Slowly but surely, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, painting a damning picture of misconduct and abuse of power. Despite the mounting proof of her innocence, releasing Maya wasn't enough to quell the storm brewing within Marcus. As a man who had devoted his life to upholding justice, discovering corruption within his own ranks shook him to his core. Sitting beside Maya later that night in the safety of their home, he listened intently as she recounted every detail of her ordeal. Her voice trembled as she described the fear and humiliation she'd felt, but also her anger, not just at Harris, but at the entire system that allowed such injustices to occur unchecked. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you," Marcus said. Softly, guilt etched across his face. Maya reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "It's not your fault, Dad," she replied. "But we can't let them get away with this. If they think they can treat people like this and face no consequences, then nothing will ever change." Her words struck a chord deep within Marcus. He nodded, resolve hardening in his eyes. "You're right," he said. "This isn't just about clearing your name. It's about exposing the rot festering in this department. And I promise you, we'll do whatever it takes to make sure justice is served." Over the next few days, Marcus launched an internal investigation, determined to uncover the full extent of the corruption plaguing his force. He assigned trusted detectives outside the usual chain of command to dig into Harris's history, poring over past cases and interviewing colleagues who might shed light on his behavior. What they uncovered was staggering. Harris and several other officers had routinely harassed minority residents, fabricating evidence to boost arrest numbers and secure promotions. Worse still, they operated with impunity, knowing higher-ups often turned a blind eye. Armed with this information, Marcus faced immense pressure from both sides. Some colleagues urged him to bury the findings to protect the department's reputation, while activists demanded swift action. Torn between loyalty to his badge and his moral compass, Marcus ultimately chose integrity. He called a press conference, standing before cameras and reporters to publicly denounce the officers' actions and announce their suspensions pending criminal charges. Meanwhile, Maya refused to stay silent. With her father's blessing, she began documenting her experience online, sharing videos and writing posts detailing the systemic racism plaguing law enforcement. Her story resonated deeply, sparking outrage across social media platforms. People rallied behind her, organizing protests outside the precinct and demanding reform. For once, the voices of marginalized communities were amplified, forcing the town to confront its ugly truths. Through it all, Maya remained steadfast, channeling her pain into purpose. She partnered with local activists and advocacy groups, attending meetings and speaking at rallies to push for meaningful change. Her courage inspired others to share their own stories of injustice, creating a groundswell of support that extended far beyond their small town. For Marcus, the battle was equally personal. Threats poured in, some anonymous, others brazenly signed by disgruntled officers. But he refused to back down. Every insult, every attempt to intimidate him only fueled his determination. He implemented sweeping reforms within the department, including mandatory anti-bias training and stricter oversight measures. Though progress was slow, the message was clear. No one was above the law, not even those sworn to enforce it. As weeks turned into months, the scandal continued to dominate headlines. The trial against Harris and his accomplices loomed on the horizon, promising to deliver a verdict that would reverberate throughout the nation. For Maya and Marcus, the journey had been grueling, testing their strength and resolve in ways they never imagined. Yet through it all, they remained united, drawing strength from each other and the countless supporters who stood by their side. Their fight wasn't just about seeking justice for one wrong. It was about dismantling a broken system and paving the way for a brighter, fairer future. And though scars remained, Maya and Marcus emerged stronger, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they proved that even in the darkest moments, courage and truth could light the path forward. The days following Maya's release were a blur of emotions. Relief, anger, fear, and determination swirled together in an overwhelming mix. For Marcus, the weight of his daughter's ordeal pressed heavily on his shoulders. As police chief, he had always prided himself on maintaining order and justice within the department. But now, faced with undeniable evidence of corruption under his watch, he couldn't ignore the cracks in the foundation he'd worked so hard to build. Every morning as he walked into the precinct, the stares from officers told him everything. Some supported him quietly, while others resented him for rocking the boat. Marcus knew that exposing Harris and his accomplices wouldn't be easy. The BI department wasn't just a workplace, it was a brotherhood where loyalty often trumped morality. Officers who might have suspected wrongdoing in the past had stayed silent, fearing retaliation or ostracism. Breaking that cycle required more than authority, it demanded courage and transparency. Determined to root out the rot, Marcus assembled a small team of trusted detectives outside the usual chain of command. These individuals shared his vision for reform and understood the gravity of what they were about to uncover. The investigation began with painstaking attention to detail. Records were reviewed, body camera footage analyzed, and old cases reopened. What emerged was a pattern of misconduct that stretched back years. Harris and his crew had targeted minority residents disproportionately, fabricating evidence to inflate arrest statistics and secure promotions. In one instance, a young man had been wrongfully convicted of theft based on planted evidence, spending months in jail before being exonerated. Another case involved a woman accused of drug possession, after officers tampered with her belongings during a routine traffic stop. Each story painted a chilling picture of abuse of power, leaving Marcus sickened by the realization that such practices had gone unchecked for far too long. As the findings piled up, Marcus found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he felt betrayed, not just by Harris and his accomplices, but by the culture of silence that had allowed them to operate freely. On the other hand, he recognized that punishing a few bad apples wouldn't solve the deeper issues plaguing the department. Racism and systemic bias weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a larger problem rooted in ignorance and fear. To truly make a difference, Marcus knew he needed to address not only individual actions, but also the attitudes and policies that enabled them. While Marcus focused on dismantling the corruption within the department, Maya channeled her energy into raising awareness about racial profiling and police misconduct. Her online posts gained traction quickly, resonating with people across the country who had experienced similar injustices. She documented her own story in vivid detail, sharing photos of the bruises left by the handcuffs and screenshots of hateful messages she received after speaking out. Her vulnerability struck a chord, inspiring others to come forward with their own experiences. One evening, as Maya scrolled through comments on her latest post, she noticed a message from someone named Jamal. "Your story sounds a lot like mine," he wrote. "I was framed by cops when I was 19, spent 2 years in prison for something I didn't do. No one believed me then, but seeing you speak up gives me hope." His words hit Maya like a punch to the gut. She realized that her experience wasn't unique. It was part of a much bigger narrative, one that needed to be heard. Determined to amplify marginalized voices, Maya started hosting virtual town halls, inviting victims of police misconduct to share their stories. At first, turnout was modest, but word spread quickly. People from different states, backgrounds, and walks of life joined the discussions, united by their desire for change. Many expressed gratitude for having a platform to speak openly about their struggles, while others offered advice on how to hold law enforcement accountable. Through these conversations, Maya learned valuable lessons about grassroots activism and the importance of community support. Back at home, father and daughter spent hours strategizing ways to tackle the issue from multiple angles. Marcus emphasized the need for institutional reform, pushing for policy changes that would increase accountability and reduce opportunities for misconduct. He proposed mandatory anti-bias training for all officers, along with stricter oversight. Measures such as independent review boards to investigate complaints against the department. Meanwhile, Maya advocated for broader societal shifts, urging schools to incorporate lessons about systemic racism into their curriculums and encouraging local businesses to adopt diversity initiatives. Their combined efforts began to yield results. Activists organized protests outside the precinct, demanding justice not only for Maya but for everyone affected by discriminatory policing. Local news outlets picked up the story, shining a spotlight on the flaws within the system. Even national media took notice, sending reporters to interview Maya and Marcus about their fight for accountability. With each passing day, the pressure mounted on Harris and his accomplices, forcing them to confront the consequences of their actions. Yet despite the progress, opposition remained fierce. Anonymous threats flooded Marcus's inbox, warning him to drop the investigation or face dire consequences. Vandals defaced his home with racist graffiti, shattering windows and scrawling hateful slurs on the walls. Maya, too, endured harassment online, with trolls accusing her of lying and exaggerating her ordeal. Some even suggested that Marcus was using his position to protect his daughter, dismissing their efforts as favoritism rather than genuine advocacy. Through it all, Marcus and Maya refused to back down. They leaned on each other for strength, drawing inspiration from the growing movement around them. Friends, family, and supporters rallied behind them, offering encouragement and protection when needed. One neighbor installed security cameras around their property, while another organized a neighborhood watch group to deter further vandalism. Allies from the activist community provided resources and guidance, helping Maya refine her messaging and expand her reach. Amidst the chaos, moments of reflection reminded them why they were fighting. Late one night, as Maya and Marcus sat together on the couch, flipping through old photo albums, they paused at a picture taken during Maya's high school graduation. In it, she stood proudly beside her father, wearing a cap and gown, her smile radiant with dreams of a brighter future. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Maya asked softly. Marcus nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I told you that no matter what happens, you should never let anyone dim your light. That the world needs people like you, people who care deeply and aren't afraid to stand up for what's right." Maya smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Well, Dad, I think we're proving that point right now. Together." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, fortified by shared purpose and unwavering resolve. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Change rarely came without resistance, but they also knew they weren't alone. Across the country, people were waking up to the realities of systemic racism and demanding accountability from those in power. Maya and Marcus had become symbols of hope, reminding everyone that even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage and truth could prevail. As preparations for Harris's trial intensified, anticipation hung thick in the air. Evidence against him and his accomplices was damning, leaving little room for doubt about their guilt. Witnesses lined up to testify, eager to expose the lies and manipulation that had ruined so many lives. Legal experts predicted a guilty verdict, but for Maya and Marcus, the outcome represented more than just justice. It symbolized a turning point, a chance to rewrite the rules, rebuild trust, and create a fairer, more equitable society. In quiet moments, Maya allowed herself to dream of what the future might hold. Perhaps she'd write a book about her experience, offering guidance to others navigating similar struggles. Or maybe she'd start a nonprofit dedicated to educating youth about civil rights and empowering marginalized communities. Whatever path she chose, she vowed to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved to live free from fear and prejudice. For Marcus, the journey reinforced his belief in the power of leadership. By standing firm in the face of adversity, he showed his officers, and the entire town, that integrity mattered more than popularity. Though rebuilding trust within the department would take time, he remained committed to fostering a culture of accountability and respect. Every policy change, every training session, and every conversation brought them closer to realizing that goal. Together, Maya and Marcus proved that even the darkest storms could give way to sunlight. If only we dared to weather them. Their story served as a beacon of hope, reminding the world that justice wasn't just an abstract ideal. It was something worth striving for, no matter the cost. And as they stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they were stronger together than apart. The trial of Detective Harris and his accomplices became the talk of the town, and soon the entire nation. Courtrooms were typically quiet, orderly spaces where judges spoke in measured tones and lawyers presented arguments methodically. But this case was different. Emotions ran high and the stakes couldn't have been clearer. Justice for Maya Thompson and countless others who had suffered under a corrupt system versus the entrenched power of those who sought to protect it at all costs. On the first day of the trial, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters jostled for seats, their cameras flashing as Marcus and Maya entered together. The sight of them, father and daughter standing side by side, sent a powerful message. Here were two individuals refusing to be silenced, determined to hold wrongdoers accountable no matter how intimidating the opposition. As they took their places in the front row, Maya glanced at her father, drawing strength from his steady presence. Despite everything they'd endured, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The prosecution's opening statement painted a damning picture of Harris and his crew. Lead prosecutor Amanda Carter outlined the evidence meticulously. Body camera, footage showing blatant misconduct, witness testimonies describing fabricated charges, and internal documents revealing patterns of racial profiling. This isn't just about one victim, Carter declared, her voice ringing through the packed room. It's about exposing a culture of corruption that has poisoned our justice system for far too long. Harris's defense attorney, a sharp-tongued lawyer named Richard Lang, countered with fiery rhetoric. He accused the prosecution of bias, claiming they were targeting Harris simply because he was a white officer accused by a black woman. Let's not forget, Lang said, gesturing dramatically toward Maya, that Miss Thompson is the daughter of Police Chief Marcus Thompson. How can we trust that this investigation wasn't influenced by personal vendettas? The comment drew murmurs from the crowd, but Maya remained composed. She knew attempts to discredit her were inevitable, but she refused to let them shake her resolve. Instead, she focused on the facts, the irrefutable proof that Harris and his accomplices had framed her and countless others. Over the next several days, witnesses took the stand, each adding another layer to the prosecution's case. One particularly compelling testimony came from Jamal, the young man who had reached out to Maya online months earlier. Dressed neatly in a suit, his hands trembling slightly as he swore to tell the truth, Jamal recounted the night officers planted drugs in his car during a traffic stop. I told them I didn't do anything wrong, he said, his voice breaking. But they laughed. They said no one would believe me anyway. His story resonated deeply with the jury, many of whom exchanged glances as if realizing the gravity of what they were hearing. Other victims followed, sharing harrowing accounts of false arrests, coerced confessions, and ruined lives. A mother tearfully described how her teenage son had been wrongfully imprisoned for 6 months after officers falsified evidence against him. Another man recalled being beaten during an interrogation, forced to confess to a crime he hadn't committed. Each story reinforced the prosecution's argument. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a systemic pattern of abuse. As the trial progressed, tensions outside the courthouse grew palpable. Protesters gathered daily, holding signs that read, "Justice for all" and "End police corruption." Supporters chanted slogans, their voices carrying into the courtroom windows. Meanwhile, counter-protesters showed up too, defending the accused officers and accusing Maya and Marcus of orchestrating a witch hunt. The divide between the two groups highlighted the deep-seated divisions within the community, a microcosm of the broader national debate over policing and accountability. Inside the courtroom, cross-examinations grew increasingly heated. Defense. Attorneys grilled witnesses relentlessly, attempting to poke holes in their stories or cast doubt on their credibility. At times, Maya clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. It was infuriating to watch Harris sit there, smugly, seemingly unfazed by the mounting evidence against him. Yet despite the tension, the prosecution held firm. Prosecutor Carter dismantled every weak argument the defense threw at her, leaving little room for reasonable doubt. One pivotal moment occurred when forensic experts testified about the gold necklace used to frame Maya. Using advanced technology, analysts proved conclusively that the item had been handled exclusively by Harris before being placed in Maya's bag. When the defense tried to dismiss the findings as inconclusive, Carter produced additional documentation showing similar instances of planted evidence in other cases. The courtroom erupted in whispers as the implications sank in. Harris wasn't just guilty of framing Maya, he was part of a larger conspiracy to manipulate the justice system. Throughout the trial, Marcus maintained a stoic exterior, though those close to him could see the toll it was taking. Late nights poring over files and strategizing with legal teams left him exhausted, yet he never faltered in his commitment to seeing the case through. Friends and colleagues urged him to step back, warning him that the backlash might destroy his career. But Marcus knew this fight was bigger than himself. If he walked away now, it would send a message that corruption could go unpunished, a precedent he refused to set. Maya, too, faced challenges. Testifying on the stand was one of the hardest things she'd ever done. Under intense questioning, she recounted the events of that fateful night in vivid detail. The fear, the humiliation, the realization that people meant to protect her instead saw her as expendable. For a moment, as tears welled in her eyes, she worried she might break down. But then she remembered why she was there, not just for herself, but for everyone counting on her to expose the truth. Drawing a deep breath, she finished her testimony with unwavering conviction. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Prosecutor Carter delivered a passionate speech, urging the jury to consider not only the evidence but also the broader implications of their decision. "If we allow these men to walk free," she said, her voice rising with urgency, "we are sending a message that racism and corruption are acceptable, that some lives matter more than others. Is that the kind of society we want to live in?" Lang, for his part, doubled down on his earlier claims, imploring the jury to question the motives behind the investigation. "Don't let emotions cloud your judgment," he pleaded. "Stick to the facts or lack thereof." Finally, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. As the foreman stood to announce the decision, the courtroom fell silent, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. "We find the defendants guilty on all counts," he declared, his words met with gasps and cheers. For Maya and Marcus, the verdict brought a mix of relief and vindication. Justice had been served, but the scars of the ordeal lingered. They knew the fight wasn't over. Racism and systemic bias wouldn't disappear overnight. But this victory marked a crucial step forward. Together, they vowed to keep pushing for change, knowing that true progress required sustained effort and unwavering courage. Outside the courthouse, supporters erupted in celebration, chanting slogans and embracing one another. For the first time in a long while, hope seemed tangible. And as Maya looked out at the sea of faces cheering for justice, she realized something profound. Their struggle had ignited a movement, one that would continue to grow until fairness and equality prevailed. The guilty verdict against Detective Harris and his accomplices marked a monumental victory, but it was far from the end of Maya and Marcus Thompson's journey. While justice had been served in the courtroom, the ripple effects of the trial extended far beyond its walls. For the town, and for many others watching across the country, the case became a catalyst for difficult conversations about systemic racism, police accountability, and the urgent need for reform. In the days following the verdict, media coverage intensified. National news outlets featured interviews with Maya and Marcus, highlighting their courage in standing up to corruption. Talk shows invited experts to discuss the broader implications of the case, while social media buzzed with hashtags like "No More Justice for Maya" and "Police Reform Now." What started as a personal fight for one family had grown into a movement, inspiring countless individuals to demand change within their own communities. For Maya, the newfound attention came with both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, she felt empowered by the support pouring in from strangers who shared her story and rallied behind her cause. Messages flooded her inbox, some thanking her for speaking out, others sharing their own experiences of injustice. One email in particular stood out. It was from a teenage girl named Sarah, whose older brother had been wrongfully arrested years ago. "Reading about you made me realize I'm not alone," Sarah wrote. "You give me hope that things can get better." Yet, alongside the encouragement came hostility. Trolls continued to harass Maya online, accusing her of lying or exaggerating her ordeal. Some even suggested that the guilty verdict was proof of reverse discrimination, a claim Maya found infuriating, yet unsurprising. She knew racism wasn't just about individual acts of hatred. It was embedded in societal structures designed to maintain inequality. Still, reading hateful comments wore on her emotionally, making her question whether the cost of speaking out was worth it. Marcus noticed the toll it was taking on his daughter. "You don't have to carry this burden alone," he told her one evening as they sat together at the kitchen table. "We're in this together, remember?" Maya nodded, appreciating his reassurance, but deep down, she knew she couldn't step back now. Too much was at stake, not just for herself but for future generations who deserved to live in a world free from fear and prejudice. Determined to channel her pain into purpose, Maya threw herself into activism. She partnered with organizations dedicated to ending racial profiling and holding law enforcement accountable. Together, they organized workshops, town halls, and educational campaigns aimed at raising awareness about systemic racism. Her focus shifted toward empowering marginalized voices, ensuring that those most affected by injustice had platforms to share their stories. One initiative close to Maya's heart involved mentoring young people interested in advocacy work. She launched a program called Voices Unsilenced, which brought teens together to learn about civil rights history, public speaking, and grassroots organizing. During meetings, Maya encouraged participants to express themselves freely, reminding them that their voices mattered. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she often said, "but every small action counts. Speak up, stand firm, and never let anyone tell you your truth isn't valid." Meanwhile, Marcus faced his own set of challenges. The trial had exposed cracks in the department's foundation, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about leadership and accountability. Officers loyal to Harris whispered behind closed doors, questioning Marcus's integrity and accusing him of favoritism. Anonymous threats continued to pour in, warning him to abandon his push for reform or face consequences. Vandals struck again, spray painting derogatory slurs on the precinct's exterior walls. Yet, despite the hostility, Marcus remained steadfast. He understood that true reform required more than punishing bad actors. It demanded systemic changes to prevent such abuses from happening in the first place. To that end, Marcus introduced sweeping reforms within the department. Mandatory anti-bias training became standard for all officers, emphasizing empathy, de-escalation techniques, and cultural sensitivity. Independent review boards were established, to investigate complaints against law enforcement, ensuring transparency and accountability. Body cameras were upgraded with tamper-proof technology, and footage was required to be reviewed regularly for signs of misconduct. Some officers embraced these changes, recognizing the importance of rebuilding trust with the community. Others resisted fiercely, viewing the reforms as an attack on their profession. Resistance manifested in subtle ways: slowed response times during calls, increased absenteeism, and passive-aggressive remarks during meetings. Marcus acknowledged the resistance but refused to relent. "If we want to earn respect, we have to act respectfully," he reminded his team during a tense briefing. "This isn't about punishment, it's about progress." As weeks turned into months, the impact of Marcus's efforts began to show. Community relations improved slowly but steadily. Residents noticed officers engaging more positively with neighborhoods, attending local events, and participating in dialogue sessions. Complaints against the department decreased, signaling a shift toward greater accountability. Though skepticism lingered among some community members, Marcus viewed these incremental improvements as victories worth celebrating. Amidst the chaos, Maya and Marcus found solace in each other's company. Their bond grew stronger with each challenge they overcame, fueled by a shared commitment to creating a fairer, more equitable society. They spent evenings discussing strategies, brainstorming ideas, and reflecting on how far they'd come. Sometimes, when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, they allowed themselves moments of quiet reflection, watching old movies, cooking meals together, or simply sitting side by side under the stars. One night, as they strolled through their backyard, Maya paused to look up at the sky. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if none of this had happened?" she asked softly. Marcus smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I think about that sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember all the good that's come from it. The people inspired, the lives changed, the conversation started. If we hadn't fought back, none of that would have happened." Maya nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose wash over her. Yes, the road ahead would still be fraught with obstacles. Racism and systemic bias wouldn't disappear overnight. But she took comfort in knowing they weren't alone. Across the country, activists, allies, and everyday citizens were joining, forces to dismantle oppressive systems and build something better in their place. Their work intersected in unexpected ways, too. Inspired by Maya's advocacy, schools began incorporating lessons about systemic racism into their curriculums. Local businesses adopted diversity initiatives, pledging to hire more inclusively and support minority-owned enterprises. Even politicians took notice, introducing legislation aimed at increasing police oversight and addressing racial disparities in the justice system. Each development reinforced the idea that collective action could drive meaningful change. Still, Maya and Marcus knew the fight wasn't theirs alone. They leaned heavily on their support network: friends, family, colleagues, and strangers who believed in their mission. When vandals struck again, neighbors banded together to clean up the mess. When trolls targeted Maya online, supporters flooded her page with messages of encouragement. When Marcus faced backlash from within the department, trusted colleagues offered guidance and solidarity. These acts of kindness reminded them that they were part of something larger than themselves, a movement fueled by love, resilience, and hope. As the year drew to a close, Maya reflected on how much had changed since that fateful night in the alley. She thought about the fear she'd felt, the anger that had consumed her, and the determination that had carried her through. Most importantly, she thought about the countless lives touched by their fight. Not just victims seeking justice, but ordinary people inspired to take a stand against injustice. Looking ahead, Maya envisioned a future where fairness and equality reigned supreme. Perhaps she'd write a book chronicling her experience, offering guidance to others navigating similar struggles. Or maybe she'd expand Voices Unsilenced into a nationwide program, equipping young advocates with tools to effect change. Whatever path she chose, she vowed to keep fighting, for herself, for her father, and for everyone yearning for a brighter tomorrow. For Marcus, The journey reaffirmed his belief in the power of leadership. By standing firm in the face of adversity, he showed his officers and the entire town that integrity mattered more than popularity. Though rebuilding trust within the department would take time, he remained committed to fostering a culture of accountability and respect. Every policy change, every training session, and every conversation brought them closer to realizing that goal. Together, Maya and Marcus proved that even the darkest storms could give way to sunlight. If only we dared to weather them, their story served as a beacon of hope, reminding the world that justice wasn't just an abstract ideal. It was something worth striving for, no matter the cost. And as they stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they were stronger together than apart. Months after the trial concluded, life in the small town began to settle into a new rhythm. The guilty verdict against Detective Harris and his accomplices had sent shockwaves through the community, forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about racism and corruption. Yet, as the initial fervor faded, the real work of healing and rebuilding began. For Maya and Marcus Thompson, this phase was both challenging and transformative, a time to reflect on their journey, celebrate victories, and prepare for the battles still ahead. Maya's activism continued to gain momentum, reaching audiences far beyond her hometown. Her online presence grew exponentially, with followers eagerly awaiting her posts and updates. She used this platform wisely, sharing not only her own story but also amplifying voices from marginalized communities across the country. Whether it was highlighting cases of police misconduct or advocating for policy changes, Maya became a trusted figure in the fight for justice. Her authenticity resonated deeply, earning her invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and community events nationwide. One particularly memorable event took place at a national civil rights summit held in Washington, D.C. Standing before a packed auditorium, Maya delivered a speech that left many in tears. "I didn't choose this fight," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "It chose me. But I stand here today because I believe in the power of truth. I believe in the strength of unity. And I believe that no matter how broken our systems may seem, we have the ability to fix them if we're willing to do the hard work." Her message struck a chord, inspiring standing ovations and sparking conversations long after the event ended. Journalists hailed her as a rising leader in the movement for racial equality, while grassroots organizations sought her guidance on campaigns aimed at systemic reform. Despite the accolades, Maya remained humble, reminding herself daily that her purpose wasn't fame, it was change. Back home, Marcus faced ongoing resistance within the police department. While some officers embraced the reforms he implemented, others clung stubbornly to old habits. Complaints trickled in about stricter oversight measures, with critics arguing they hindered efficiency. Anonymous letters accused Marcus of favoring minority officers over white ones, fueling tensions among the ranks. Yet, Marcus refused to compromise. He knew progress wouldn't come without pushback, and he remained committed to creating an environment where accountability and respect went hand in hand. To bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community, Marcus launched several initiatives designed to foster trust. One program paired officers with local residents for monthly dialogues, encouraging open communication and mutual understanding. Another initiative involved organizing joint volunteer projects, such as cleaning parks or serving meals at shelters, to humanize officers in the eyes of the public. Slowly but surely, these efforts began to mend fractured relationships, proving that collaboration could yield positive results. As father and daughter navigated their respective roles in the fight for justice, they leaned heavily on each other for support. Their bond had deepened immeasurably throughout the ordeal, transforming them into pillars of strength for one another. Late-night conversations often centered around lessons learned and dreams for the future. "You know," Marcus said one evening, sipping coffee at the kitchen table, "this whole experience has taught me something important. Real leadership isn't about wielding power, it's about empowering others." Maya nodded thoughtfully, swirling her tea. And I've realized that courage isn't the absence of fear, she replied. It's choosing to act despite it. Every time someone speaks up, every time they refuse to stay silent, they're planting seeds of hope. That's what keeps me going. Their reflections weren't limited to personal growth. They extended to broader societal shifts as well. Across the nation's cities began adopting policies inspired by Marcus's reforms. Independent review boards sprang up in departments previously resistant to external oversight. Anti-bias training programs gained traction, equipping officers with tools to recognize and address implicit prejudices. Even lawmakers took notice, introducing legislation aimed at increasing transparency and reducing racial disparities in policing. Still, challenges persisted. Racism wasn't confined to law enforcement. It permeated every aspect of society, from education and healthcare to housing and employment. Recognizing this, Maya expanded her advocacy to tackle systemic inequities beyond policing. She partnered with educators to develop curriculums focused on diversity and inclusion, urging schools to teach students about privilege, allyship, and the importance of speaking out against injustice. She collaborated with healthcare providers to address disparities in medical treatment, ensuring underserved populations received adequate care, and she worked tirelessly to promote economic opportunities for minority entrepreneurs, helping level the playing field for those historically excluded. Through it all, Maya never lost sight of the individuals whose stories had fueled her mission. She stayed in touch with Jamal, the young man who had testified during the trial, offering mentorship and encouragement as he rebuilt his life. She checked in regularly with Sarah, the teenage girl who had written to her months earlier, providing guidance as she navigated her own struggles. These connections reminded Maya of why she fought so hard, to create a world where no one felt invisible or powerless. For Marcus, the journey reinforced his belief in the ripple effect of integrity. By holding himself and his department accountable, he demonstrated that change was possible, even in environments resistant to it. Officers who once doubted his methods began to see the value in transparency, realizing that trust could coexist with authority. Residents who had distrusted law enforcement started viewing officers as partners rather than adversaries. It was slow, incremental progress, but Marcus knew lasting change required patience and persistence. As the years passed, Maya and Marcus's efforts bore fruit in ways neither could have anticipated. Schools adopted inclusive curriculums, businesses prioritized diversity, and governments enacted sweeping reforms. Communities once divided found common ground, united by a shared vision of fairness and equality. Activists inspired by Maya's story carried the torch forward, igniting movements in towns and cities nationwide. Together, they proved that collective action could dismantle even the most entrenched systems of oppression. Yet, amidst the triumphs, Maya and Marcus remained grounded. They understood that the fight for justice was never truly finished. It evolved, adapting to new challenges and contexts, but they also recognized the importance of celebrating milestones along the way. On the anniversary of the trial's verdict, they hosted a gathering at their home, inviting friends, family, and allies who had supported them throughout their journey. Laughter filled the air as guests shared memories, toasted to resilience, and reaffirmed their commitment to the cause. As the sun set, casting golden hues across the backyard, Maya stood beside her father, gazing at the faces illuminated by candlelight. "We've come so far," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe. Marcus smiled, placing an arm around her shoulders. "But there's still farther to go," he replied. "And we'll keep going, together." In that moment, surrounded by love and solidarity, Maya and Marcus felt a profound sense of gratitude. Their battle had been grueling, testing their strength, resolve, and faith in humanity. But it had also revealed the extraordinary capacity for courage, compassion, and connection. Through their unwavering determination, they had transformed personal pain into a force for good, proving that even in the darkest times, light could prevail. Their story served as a reminder that justice wasn't just an abstract ideal, it was A living, breathing entity shaped by the actions of ordinary people willing to stand up and demand better. And as Maya and Marcus looked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever lay ahead, they knew they were part of something greater than themselves. Together, they dared to dream of a future where fairness and equality reigned supreme, and where everyone, regardless of race or background, could live free from fear and prejudice.